My name is Adrian, and I'll be responding to the claim MMA is one of the safest contact sports today. Secondary claims made by the advocate are: 1, MMA is safer than boxing because boxers are more likely to suffer from more serious injuries such as concussions, loss of consciousness, broken noses and bones, etc. 2, MMA has strict safety rules and regulations from all its organizations, as well as government sanctions that are dictated per state. And 3, fighters are taken care of very well in the organizations. My response to the secondary claim number 1 is, although MMA may be a safer sport, it does not mean MMA fighters are not subject to being prone to the same injuries boxers suffer from. The claims that MMA fighting is safer because the MMA athletes contract less injuries. However, there is no evidence cited that MMA fighting has a lower rate of injury than boxing. A counter to this is MMA fighters have the same chances of suffering from those injuries such as concussions, loss of consciousness, broken noses, etc. because similarly to boxers, MMA fighters get knocked out as well, and this results in a loss of consciousness and even concussions. Other fragile face parts are most commonly broken during these fights, including broken noses. In a National Post article, the University of Toronto states that a mixed martial arts fighter suffers a traumatic brain injury in almost a third of professional bouts. This is a far higher rate than those more higher rate than those in hockey, football, or even boxing. In an ESPN article an ESPN article on a 2014 American Journal of Sports Medicine study indicates that there is a higher incidence of brain trauma than boxing because 1/3 of professional MMA matches end in a knockout or a technical knockout. The secondary claim, number 2, MMA has strict safety rules and regulations from all of its organizations, is more informative than argumentative. Both boxing and football are contact sports that also instill strict safety rules and regulations, which should make them just as safe as MMA fighting. The kind of this is all sports have safety rules and regulations, even if they are not contact sports from its organizations. All participants and athletes have to follow in order for them to compete. The National Football League states rules on their website that prohibits players from unfair sportsmanship, returning after concussion until he is fully asymptomatic, as well as if he shows any symptoms of loss of consciousness, he is also not able to play. The World Boxing Federation also has rules and regulations and medical examination and safety standards, which lists that boxers must all submit their medical reports, receive a physical examination by a physician, and comply and follow with the safety standard requirements declared by the Professional Boxing Safety Act of 1996, which prohibits any person from arranging, promoting, organizing, producing, or fighting in a professional boxing match held in a state that has no boxing commission. There are also at least 2 ringside physicians during the fight at all times. Secondary claim 3 claims that MMA fighters are treated well. This claim is also informative, and there's also nothing stated that constitutes what being treated well is. All athletes are taken care of due to the need for them to perform at their max in every game or fight that they participate in. There's also no evidence that states that athletes in other sports are treated badly. So in conclusion, while MMA may be one of the safest contact sports today, all other contact sports have their own set of safety rules and regulations that would make their sports safe as well. Thank you.
All right, the structural stuff is all good. On the first point, you kind of suggest that the advocate doesn't really cite a source for their evidence, and that you say that they have the same chance of injury, either concussions or like facial lacerations or parts being broken. I think you could explain a little bit more how that is the case, why they would have the same risk, because a lot of the same sorts of moves are used in MMA. In fact, there might be some reason to believe that the risks are greater because there's less protective gear I'm not exactly sure how all of that works. It seems like there would be some information that would support that position. The best information that you have is that there's a brain injury in 1/3 of these professional bouts. I think that's including both boxing and MMA, so it doesn't sound like there's a significant difference. The second piece of information there seems like it's focusing on boxing, so I guess there's some comparison that's being made that says that they are functionally equivalent. I don't know about deaths. I don't remember exactly what the data was on deaths. You seem to largely have skimped around that, talking more about long-term injuries. It wouldn't surprise me at all that you would find that there is a lot of data about people who've been MMA fighters who've had other kinds of issues that are not necessarily, death, but there might be, like you said, traumatic brain injury, suicides, that sort of thing. So they may not die in the ring, but they die outside of the ring as a result of things that happened in the ring. That would probably be a vein of information that you could develop that would get you some more information on that point. The second and the third point you're mostly dismissing as being primarily informative in nature. I think you do a good job showing that other sports take the same kind of care of their athletes. They have the same kinds of rules and procedures to avoid injury and damage. I don't know what the rules and procedures are in MMA. I mean, in boxing, you can't hit people below the belt. You can't be kicking them. You can't be punching them in the back of the head, that sort of thing. In MMA, are all those things allowed? If they're allowed, that seems like it would be more risky. I don't get any explanation about why they are less risky from the advocate, and it seems to me like you could make a pretty good comparison here, suggesting that the MMA is still kind of problematic as a result. And then there's apparently some federal regulations that deal with this also, which I thought was interesting, and which also offers some comparison. So in the long run, even though you're kind of dismissing it as being informational, you do manage to make an argument on that point. On the last point, I think when you're talking about care of the participants in the process, well, basically it comes down to everybody takes care of them. I don't know that that's true either way. I don't know that it changes my guess about whether or not one thing is safer than the other. It feels like kind of an addendum that nobody's really developing very much. All right, thank you.